How do we leave on this earth a good legacy for our generation? This is the title of the sixth session of the proceedings of this day. Sir Tim Smith, the Executive Vice Chair and co-founder of Eden Project, will address this subject. The floor is yours, sir.
Hello, everybody. Okay, I don't know whether there are any pictures here. That was the Eden Project. I'm going to speak a little bit about the Eden Project, but not a lot. No, I will hold it. What I'm going to talk about, because I've only got 20 minutes, is I want to talk about the marvelous things I've seen over the last 2 years, simply because I can. A lot of people try to sound important about sustainability, and for me, the story of sustainability is simply about whether when you get up in the morning, you feel confident and optimistic about the world that confronts you. I said earlier today that a very good friend of mine, Bill McDonough, always said about the word sustainability that if your relationship was described as sustainable, you should be very depressed, because actually life should be much more joyous than that. So I want to start my first story in my journey around the world of optimism in Ireland. I've seen such amazing things. I want you to come with me to Ireland, to a place called Brunna Boyne. Brunna Boyne is one of the most famous Neolithic prehistoric sites in Europe, and there is a very famous big tomb there called New Grange. And New Grange, which is built on this river, which was once very rich in fish, is one of 3 enormous mounds for megalithic tombs. People are buried there. A lot of people are buried there. And a friend of mine, 4 years ago, bought a big estate with a house that was falling down in the middle of it. And he has since spent more money on archaeology than anybody in Ireland, ever. Why would you do that? Well, he did that because he was really interested in a story. He wanted to find out whether this place with these amazing tombs was important for a specific reason. And they excavated all the fields and they found traces of very, very early agriculture going back to about 6,000 years from now. While he was doing that, he decided that he would plant a few trees. And when he dug the holes for the trees, he discovered something very weird. There were no worms. That's a very bad sign for your land. And it made him go a bit mad. He decided that he was not going to restore his house, he was going to restore the land. And he developed this mad passion for measuring everything, to the point that today he can tell you what is in almost every single square meter of his 600 acres. That is astonishing. He can measure the biomass that grows every year to the ton. He can measure the increase in biodiversity by numbers. He can tell you about the fertility of the soil. And let me tell you about the fertility of the soil, because what he did was he realized that soil likes pig's piss. But it likes pig's piss when there's no ammonia. So he built a plant that took the ammonia out, and he injected all his 600 acres with pig urine. And then he bought a lot of worms. And he put the worms on the land, so that today the land is seething with worms. Seething with worms. Now, for those of you who don't know about worms, worms eat soil. And when worms eat soil, what they crap out is beautiful soil. So you've got to imagine 600 acres that was capable of growing almost nothing, that today, 4 years later, is incredibly rich. I mean, it's unbelievably rich. 3 years ago, he started to restore one building. If your lives depended on it, you would never guess what he restored. It was a racetrack for horses. Why would you do that? For those of you who do not know Ireland, it will forever be a mystery. But the Irish adore horse racing, just like many of the citizens of this fair place. He rebuilt the racetrack because he wanted to invite all his neighbors to come to the horse racing. In the first year, 3,000 people came to see the horse racing. This year, 7,000 people came to see the horse racing. And I wonder whether you could guess how much he charges to come and see the horse racing. 5 minutes. The price of coming to see the horse racing is that you, the guest, must give the host 5 minutes of total silence and attention. So when he gets up on a table and claps his hands, 7,000 people, you can hear a pin drop. It is a magnificent sight. So, what does he say? He gets on the table, he opens the side of the tent in which they're having tea. It's a very large tent. And he points at the 3 enormous tombs. And he looks at these farmers and he says, "My friends, these are our relatives. There are relatives buried here from 6,000 years ago. They would be so ashamed if they knew that we had so betrayed the land, that we've put so many chemicals on it, that when it rains, the chemicals, the nitrates, the phosphates wash off into a river that was once famous for being the richest of all rivers in Ireland." Now, 4 years ago, on a patch about as big as this, we poured 1 gallon of water. The soil absorbed only about 2 pints. The rest started to wash off the hillside. Today, this year, I saw something which I would never have believed to be true. He poured 20 gallons onto that big, and the water just went straight into the soil and was absorbed. That soil was now containing the water. The water flows in that soil were no longer leaching down to the river and killing the fish. And he said to the people, he said, "Did you realize all those bumps of stone in that river, they were built 6,000 years ago. We used to harvest the fish in this river. We used to harvest the freshwater shrimp. Today, this year, the salmon are coming back. The shrimp are coming back. But the most incredible thing is that for 30 miles up the River Boyne, all these lovers of horse racing now know that they do not wish to disappoint their ancestors." Why am I telling you this? I have the misfortune of having to work with lots of scientists who seem to think, I'm joking of course, most of my best friends are scientists, but they seem to think that you can change the world with a fact. Facts change nothing. There are only 4 important words in the English language, and I'm sure it's the same in Arabic as it is in Chinese. We all have these 4 words, and they're the words that give everything meaning, and they're the words which we all know. We learnt at our mother's knee. Once upon a time. Everything is about story. If we are going to save, if that's the right word, save ourselves, if we are going to lead a civilized life, if we are to be those good ancestors, we need to start telling ourselves stories about our rediscovery of our nobility, our rediscovery of our clever, gentle ingenuity, rather than our capricious, avaricious appetite. The battleground we are all facing is a very, very difficult one. We have been trained to consume. We have been trained to lose a sense of self because most of us, I would include myself, have lost a deep-rooted sense of belonging and compensate for it by consuming, making us ever less happy, ever less fulfilled. And I think the thing that we need to think about a lot, if we're going to talk about good ancestors, is what stories can we tell ourselves which are about the responsibility that we are prepared to take. It's very weird. I do very odd things, I have to tell you. I accept every third invitation I receive. It's not that I don't accept the first, but I always accept the third. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? How stupid is that? It means that I have to go to so many events that are terrible. But I can't say no, I have to go. You know why I go? I go because I know that I'm an intelligent human being, but I'm lazy. Like everybody else in this room, you're lazy. You think you're clever, you think you're thoughtful, you think you're brainy. You've read the best magazines, you've read the best journalists. But actually, the only way you meet, if you want to know what a bore is someone who says you need to go to university to meet the people you need to meet. That is so daddy. Because magic, if you know about history, if you know about magic, it's about meeting the people you didn't know you needed to meet. Because the magic comes when you rub up against people who are doing something that you should have no interest in. But because you're now in this weird place, you've got nothing better to do, you promise you're going to do, you now start talking to somebody, and then they suddenly start telling you stuff, and you go, my word. Oh my word, I'd never thought those things go together. And it's happened so often in my life. I introduced Nick Grimshaw to the world expert on Alzheimer's because I got drunk in a bar with a man who I'd never met before. And I said to him, do you want to take a gamble and get on a night train to Cornwall and meet lots and lots of people that you would never have met before? He said, sure, I'll come. And I invited him to lunch with Nick Grimshaw. Nick Grimshaw said it was one of the most important days of his entire life. There he is talking to an expert in Alzheimer's who's telling him about the design you need for buildings to make people who get up who are shuffling feel as if they've got up for a reason. You've got to make strong colors, you've got comfortable sofas, fires, candles, so that you get up and of course I got up to go to that fire. I was worried, I didn't know why I was getting up. But the truth is, that's just common humanity made large. My life was transformed by a third meeting. I was invited to go to a talk. I had to give a talk in a small hut 180 miles from where I lived. I had to go. I was told there'd be very few people. There were very few people. But you know what? It was a bit like this. 3 months later, I am in a room like this with politicians. I've asked for money to build the Eden Project, which was eventually going to go from that to that. Yeah? That's rather good, isn't it? Now, I'm in this room, and it's obvious we are not going to get the money. The politics were all wrong. And suddenly an old man stands up in this room with maybe 100 politicians, and this is what he said. My name is Humphrey Temperley, and I am the chairman of Somerset County Council. And 3 months ago, I was in a hut near Taunton, and this man was speaking. He obviously cares about the wider region, not just his narrow geography, And I have talked to my colleagues, and we in Somerset will drop one of our projects if each of you will drop one each. My talk to 50 people and a dog in Taunton was worth £12.7 million. And it made the difference between Eden getting built and not built. But the thing about the third invitation, if there is only one thing any of you remember about my speech to you today, please promise yourself you will try this. Life suddenly opens up, because by putting yourself in the jeopardy of meeting people that nature was going to prevent you meeting because it was not something you would have done, suddenly these unusual things happen and magic happens. Now the next bit of magic, which I want to talk to you about. I was accepting a third invitation, and it was to go to talk to the Tuesday Club in Edinburgh. For those of you who don't know Britain, the most right-wing club in the country is called the Monday Club. The Scots decided to be different and set one up called the Tuesday Club. So I end up going to Scotland to talk to a lot of people who've got a very different politics to me. But you know what? It was a hell of an evening. It was marvelous. And while I was talking at that evening, a woman said to me, "Are you leaving tomorrow morning?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Could you stay for an extra 4 hours? I want to introduce you to somebody." I ended up staying an extra day, and I went to see a remarkable man. Now, you may not know this. In fact, if any of you do know this, I find it remarkable that if you filled up a German swimming pool with tap water from any of the British main water companies' tap water, they would close it down as being unfit to swim in. Our water in Britain is shit to a large degree. Why is that? Well, my next hero is a man called Howard Dryden. Look him up on the internet. He is a most extraordinary man. He is interested in fish farming. I don't know whether you know this, but last year 56% of all the fish that we ate in the world was farmed. That is extraordinary. How clever are we, us humans? Homo sap sap. Marvelous. Anyway, Howard has this vision that every city in the world can become protein independent by growing fish. But if you're going to grow fish, one of the vital things is that the water is clean and that the feces and lice that normally attach themselves to fish are cleaned off. He started a PhD using sand as a filter. I'm going to bore you for a minute, okay, because this is really important. He's using sand as a filter. This experiment wasn't going very well. He was 2 years into his PhD. He was finding out absolutely nothing. Until, in a pub, he talks to a friend of his who's a filmmaker. And his friend says, "Would you like me to film your filter from underneath?" He said, "All right." So he films it from underneath, but then he slows, as you know, when you film, it's 25 frames a second. And he took it down to 1 frame a second. And he saw, to his astonishment, that these filters, which were supposed to be world-class, it was like watching meteorite showers of bacteria going through them. And as scientists, which you all are, you will know that sand is rough and roughly round. And as water goes past it, the water molecule that touches the rough bit of sand slows down, obviously, because of friction. But what's actually happening is the second molecule that isn't touching it speeds up. It's a bit like a yum, yum, you know what I mean? So suddenly, the water molecules are just going through the sand. So Howard, like a maniac, decides to find an alternative to sand. Now, this man, today, and it could be done here in Dubai, this man recycles exactly 37% of all of the glass in Scotland. It's very precise, 37%. And He can't get enough glass, so he's building a factory in Switzerland. He wants to build factories all over the world. He can't get enough of this amazing magic material. If I was to tell you that every single major aquarium in the world, bar none, there are no exceptions, uses his cleaning materials, it's that good. Look him up, Howard Dryden. But that's not why he's my hero. He's my hero because he went to Bangladesh for a sabbatical, and he saw the thousands and thousands of people that were suffering from arsenic poisoning. And he decided he had to create a pump and a filtering system that could save people from arsenic. He spent 17 years and several million pounds of his own money developing the most perfect, most beautifully designed thing I think I've ever seen. It is a filtering pump that can take literally shit and make 2,000 gallons of clean drinking water an hour with no moving parts. And I've seen it work many, many times, and we're going to exhibit it at Eden. When you put this together, a medium that you can breed enough fish to find the food, the protein for all our population, he is in no doubt about that, no doubt. And they've been doing huge experiments using plant waste materials to feed the fish. You don't need to catch fish to mash them up to feed fish. So, where did I start? I started with measurement, extreme measurement. If we're going to be environmentalists, don't let's be hippies, let's be scientists. Let's measure every damn grain of soil, every square meter, and work out how we can make the soil brilliantly fertile, brilliantly able to sequester carbon and manage water. I've now told you about the filtering of that water and the potential for that. At Eden, we have just got permission to create our first geothermal deep well, which is going to be 4.5 kilometers deep. The temperature that you get down there, everybody knows, every schoolroom in the world I go into, I do it all over the world, and I say, do you think it sounds like common sense if the middle of the world is really, really hot, that we can just go down there and we can take the heat? And everybody goes, why haven't we done that before then? And you go, well, some people have, but we could all do that. Do you know how exciting the destruction of the fossil fuel industry is? This is the wrong part of the world to be saying this, but why it is exciting is that the drills that are necessary and are so expensive to hire will become cheaper. And when they become cheaper, you will be able to reach deep geothermal temperatures down to 6 kilometers, and the whole world will be able to benefit from it. And geothermal, which for those of you who don't know what it is, you dig a hole, well, you drill a hole, you line it, you put water down it, it hits hot rock, gets turned to steam, comes up another pipe, and if it's really hot, it can drive a turbine and give you electricity and as much hot water as you'll ever want. It was the missing link. Those of us who are environmentalists, who are pro-solar, pro-wind, pro-wave, pro-hydro, this has always been the missing link. Baseload, something you can turn on all the time. And we're going to do it at Eden, and I'm going to champion all over the world that everybody else starts doing it. We're living in the most exciting time ever, ever. It is stupendously exciting. And I want to end my talk by talking about rubbish newspapers. I don't know whether you have them here, but in Britain we have some really bad newspapers, really bad. They're the ones that always used to write about Princess Diana and film stars and all that sort of stuff, right? They will tell you that if you go into hospital, it's highly likely that someone will leave a bit of equipment inside you. That at the end of your road, there will be cocaine dealers. That everybody is violent, everybody wants to burgle your house. We're dying, it's doomed. The world is never as good as it was before. The past was always some better place. It wasn't. Just get wise. Do you want to go to a dentist in 1860? No. Now is really good. But the one thing that neuroscience is teaching us right now is something very weird. that our brains, well, it's so safe to be alive now, it is so safe that we've now become addicted to hearing bad news because it is the only way our brains can train ourselves to become fit for dealing with the torments. Is there a parent in this room who has not imagined the death of their children, the death of their dog? Where do you have to do that to make yourself fit to deal with the sadnesses, to be able to cope, to become resilient? So what I would say to you, to end, is Eden, that you saw before, I know you can go back, was that, okay? It was that. 200 foot deep, China clay waste, mineral pollution, no soil. An ordinary bunch of people, believe me, we are very ordinary. They call us visionary. The only thing that is visionary about us is that we believed we could talk to civil servants and persuade them to say the word yes. And we did. We raised £144 million. But why this is magnificent is we created 90,000 tons of soil. And I've explained to you how magnificent soil is. We planted the biggest collection of economic plants the world has ever seen in one place, and hardly any of them have died. We have 1.5 million people a year come to see this. We have created £2 billion of new wealth through this over the last 20 years. It's a success. And it's a real success because we're very political. We insist on local supply. We insist that companies that live within 30 miles of us make everything, they do everything except coffee. You can't do that. But it's really important to be political, because if you're political, suddenly all your neighbors have a reason for you to survive. And they suddenly see a market they can reach that they never could before. So you're building the strength. And that is what is called community. That is what is called digging roots deep into the ground and getting a sense of our intertwinedness. And that gives you meaning and belonging. And suddenly people actually feel enriched. And you find cultural activities going on all over the place. And people want to come there. They want to be there. They want to smell the air. So that's my last word. The secret of changing the world is not building that and turning it into that. I've turned it off, that was good, into that. That's not the point. The point is to remember that we are a storytelling ape, and we need marvelous stories. And one of the best ways to start a great, great story is to start with something small that is almost pointless and irredeemably beautiful, and it makes everybody smile. Because actually what you're saying is we're all human beings and we love all this stuff and we're pretty clever, and it's really lovely to have a chance to prove it. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Sir Tim.